What's going on, Legionnaires, and welcome back to Comic Breakdown. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that sub button and hit that notification bell to make sure you're not missing any of the content that we have coming out. And for this video, we're going to be diving into Generations Forged. Now, this is the follow-up to Generations Shattered. And in the first part, we saw the villain Dominus and our team of heroes made up of people like 1939 Batman, Kamandi, Superboy, Steel, Starfire, Sinestro, Booster Gold, and Dr. Light. And they're trying to find a way to restore the timeline from what Dominus has done, only to discover the Linearverse, which we're going to talk about and we're going to dive into. But there's a lot in this story, there's a lot to unpack, so with that being said, let's dive into this issue. Alright, so this issue picks us up in not necessarily a place, but a time, an extracted time. Dominus has taken a chunk of time and kept it solidified on a plane of his creation. And this extracted time isn't something where he can rule over, but it's a simple thing where he has his wife and his children. But he's still the puppet master. He's still pulling the strings. And he's cast our heroes throughout time. And really what he lets us know here is that he's built so much here. He's created so much. He's labored so hard for so long. And the chronal energy from all other timelines is being repurposed to cement his timeline. And that's why we see the other timelines disappearing. It's because it's taking their energy and repurposing it so his place in time can always stand. But the problem with this is it's causing everything else to be destroyed. But this is a sacrifice he is definitely willing to make for his family. And this is when his son comes running down and sees him not as a father figure, but as the villain. And this throws the kid off and it scares him. He's hesitant to even come to his father. And this is when Dominus reverses time and makes it to where his son didn't see anything and just looks like he's working in his workshop. And so by all accounts, he is trying his best to keep up this persona to his family that he is just a working stiff father who's boring and doesn't really have much going on. But this moment in time, it has to have some kind of importance to him. There's got to be a reason that he's sitting here wanting to hold on to this. And we're going to learn exactly why as we dive further in. But really, it's looking more and more like he just wants his little piece of heaven. But unfortunately, it's coming at the expense of an entire universe. And this is when we pick up with Starfire, Kamandi, and Dr. Light. And they're sitting here trying to figure out how they're going to get back to the vanishing point. How they're going to get back to the rest of the team. And this is where we see Starfire just start blasting things, trying to be able to get back. But they're in some kind of cage, in some kind of prison, if you will. And her blast doesn't work how she expects, and it actually ends up ricocheting and almost hitting all of them. And it looks like it at least scrapes Dr. Light. And then this is when we see the arrival of General Zod. And General Zod makes his entrance and is immediately intrigued by Starfire and her abilities. But this is when Kamandi just makes a break for it. He just runs and jumps out the window and hightails it. While Starfire sits there and yells, calling him a coward because he's just running away. And this is where Dr. Light, barely conscious, is telling Starfire that they need to find him. The time is running out and they have to work together. And then this is when General Zod is really about to do some damage to these two. And we see the arrival of Jor-El, Superman's father. And Jor-El really, he comes in and he's just like, listen, I'm going to take these guys off of your hands. And, you know, Jor-El is very upset about it, but the way the hierarchy works, Jor-El is going to get his way. And then we pick up hours later, and Dr. Light has recovered from her injuries. And this is when Jor-El starts to ask them, like, what planet are you guys from? And they tell him Earth, and obviously this is a place that he's never looked into yet, but it definitely intrigues him. And then they talk about Kamandi and how he fled. And Starfire decides that she's gonna go look for him. Look for him before anybody else finds him and he gets into any more trouble. And this is when Jor-El and Dr. Light have a conversation. And Jor-El is asking if she's studied the universe itself, stars in particular. And she agrees. She said, yeah, you know, this is my field. And so perhaps there's something in Jor-El's lab that might prove useful to her. And then we pick up in prehistoric Thanagar, and we see Steel battling some kind of ridiculously large tooth monster. But he's not alone. And this is when we see Superboy come riding in on a cart and launching a net at this thing. And it looks like, you know, they've been practicing at this a while, but they've caught this lizard, this giant lizard beast. And they drive the stakes into the ground to try to keep it in place. But this is when Superboy's not paying attention and gets a giant kick and is knocked flying. And Steel makes this beast go to sleep and goes to check on Superboy. And the reason that he's not recovering or being able to take a hit like that is because there's no yellow sun near this planet that they're on. That means he doesn't have any of his powers. And so he needs to start thinking more like an individual who doesn't have powers for someone who does. And Superboy tells Steel, you know, I feel trapped. I feel as trapped as that lizard. And I'm not being able to help anybody because I don't have my powers. And Steel's just like, you know, welcome to what the rest of us go through every single day. And so we see them driving around, and for them it's been months. But with Dominus's time powers, it could very easily be seconds in real time, or even 1,000 years, because he's rewriting time into something new, something only he can control. And Superboy tells him, you know, we need to get off this planet. Like, we need to go stop him. And Steel tells him, no, we need to wait. It's your night to cook, so get to cooking. And they're sitting around this campfire, and Superboy asks the question, what am I like in the future? And Steel tells him it doesn't matter. How many times you ask me this, my answer was always going to be the same. I can't tell you because it's going to damage the timeline. If I told you something, it would just make things worse. He's like, but I will tell you this. You grow up to inspire me to be the hero I am. You know, you push me to apply my mind because I don't have the powers you do. And so Superboy finally asks a question like, what are we waiting for? You know, you make super suits and super hammers and all the stuff we're living and driving around in, but you can't genius us out of here? And he tells them it's time for bed. And they wake up the next morning and they see something coming in. Something that was sent by Dominus. The thing that they have been waiting for. Eradicator and Nemesis Kid. Steel knew that Dominus would send somebody to try to finish the job. And they've just been waiting for that time to come. And now it's finally here, and Steel picks up his hammer. And the next panel brings us over to extracted time. And we see his children running around playing, and his daughter scrapes her knee. And her pain makes him want to reverse time. And that's exactly what he does. He makes it to where it never happened. And there's only good moments all the time. But he is having to focus all of his power on doing this to be able to make this reality stick. And then we pick up in the future in Electric City, native to OMAC. And we have a lantern ring telling us that the news reports indicate the ultra rich are in charge to the extreme disadvantage of everyone else. And we see the rich running around using their abuse of power and literally just shooting and destroying all the poor people. And this is when Sinestro lets them know that a Green Lantern isn't going to allow this. And he crashes their car and lets it go flying to the ground. But at the end of the day, he is a lantern and he adheres to the Guardians' rules of forbidding them to kill. And so he saves their lives, only to be met by the Global Peace Agency officers. But that's not the worst of his problems, because this is when we see the arrival of Ultra Humanite. But Sinestro is smart. And he tells him, if you are truly superior intellect, you should be able to understand that Dominus is the one altering time and that he'll easily sacrifice you in the process. And picking up blocks away, we see Booster Gold. And he's making his way through the city, telling everybody they need to get out of here because the Godness is coming. But this is when Major Force hits him right in the face. And he tells Major Force, like, don't you see that you're on the wrong side? That Dominus will sacrifice you as well? Like, if you take us out, you'll literally just be cutting your own throat. And Major Force tells him, like, you're a nobody. Like, you couldn't even be beginning to understand what you were even talking about. And Booster Gold says, you know, look around. Everything is gonna die, including you. But Major Force has a backup. He has a time travel wristband, which means he can ditch whatever he wants. And so Booster Gold tells him, go ahead, try to leave right now. And he goes to, and it doesn't work. And this is when the Godness is making its way to them And Booster Gold's just like, yep, we're dead men. And Dominus is watching this, watching through the mirror of his time. And so Booster Gold picks up Major Force and they head out. Because he heard a news report saying something about a giant bat rampaging through a Build-A-Friend. And it doesn't take a genius to know who they're talking about. And this is where we pick up back in Jor-El's lab on Krypton with Dr. Light and Jor-El. Now, Dr. Light's been here for a few weeks, and she's learned quite a bit from all the instruments and far more advanced technology. And this is where Dr. Light tells Jor-El that he's going to want to look at this. It's a confirmation that the red sun is destabilizing the planet's core. There's no preventing Krypton's destruction. Now, this is something we already know, and I don't know if this is going to fall into the timeline and retcon how they actually found out about Krypton's core failing. And this is when Laura comes in, Laura L. And she says to Jor, just tell me the truth. How long do we have? And Dr. Light says days, a couple weeks at most. But Kal-El isn't due for at least another month. And so Superman would never be born. And this is when Dr. Light says there might be a way, but it's going to take everything that she's got. Now, down on the streets of Krypton, we have Kamandi fighting Omok and some others. And they're trying to catch him, but this is when Starfire makes her appearance and swoops up Kamandi real quick, leaving behind a trail for them to follow. And then we see Dr. Light standing outside, letting them know that her powers manipulate light. Solar light in particular, but there is a grave risk. If she absorbs the power of their red sun to tap into the temporal web, the same goneness that destroyed her home might arrive there. But if she takes some of the sun's energy into herself, she may be able to do more than tap into the temporal streams and manipulate them. And in the process, buy them some more time. And so we see her use her powers, and she gave them at least a few more months, slowed it down. But Krypton will still die, but they will still see the birth of their son. And so by all accounts, DC is saying that Dr. Light is the one who saved and made sure that Superman was born and made his arrival on Earth in 1938. But there's another problem. The Goneness has found them, saving Krypton from one threat only to bring another. And this is when we pick up with Omek and the others. And Starfire has set up a trap for them, and it works beautifully, and it knocks all of them out. And Starfire goes to interrogate Artemis, only for Kamandi to just tell her, ease up a bit. He's like, I don't know a whole lot about this era or these planets, but I can tell you what I saw. And what I saw is Dominus is sending these people after us because he was lost. He has lost. Something upset him, and he believes his story may be more tragic than evil. And then this is when Dr. Light tells them all that their time has run out. The Goneness is here, and it's coming for them all. But she felt a connection when she overloaded her powers, and tells everybody to get close because it's time to go. And then we're taken back to Steel and Superboy battling Eradicator and Nemesis Kid. And Steel takes on Eradicator while Superboy goes to fight Nemesis Kid, only for Nemesis Kid to realize that Superboy doesn't have any powers. And so they're just two humans that are gonna duke it out. And we see Superboy straight give a gut punch to Nemesis Kid. And as the fight starts to wrap up a little bit and Steel and Superboy seem to be victorious, the Goneness makes its arrival. And everybody that was working for Dominus is slowly starting to realize, like, wow, this guy left us all to die. And this is when Steel and Superboy make their run from it. Running from the Goneness as fast as they can, we see Eradicator and Nemesis Kid both taken into the Goneness. But they open up a portal using one of the time travel bracelets and are able to get an escape out of this Goneness. And then taking us to Electric City, we see 1939 Batman just laying waste to all these guys around him that are trying to take him on. But then we see Booster Gold come in and lay away one of these guys in the back of their head. And this chick goes to apologize to Batman, only for her to explode because she's a Build-A-Friend. And so Booster Gold takes Batman and gets him off the street. And they meet up with Sinestro, Ultra Humanite, but these guys are all working together. And Booster Gold tells us that this tech and communication capabilities are really far advanced on the Brother Eye satellite, which OMAC is tied to. And everything was super advanced at its time. If it's still there, it may offer a solution. And so they gather everyone together and they go for a ride. And they head off to Brother Eye. And they go up and they board Brother Eye. And Brother Eye asks them, explain your presence or the defense measures will be initiated. And Booster Gold lets it know that it has to see that reality is literally being obliterated and they're trying to save it and they need its help. And so the machine tells it to proceed. And this really blows Batman's mind because, you know, it's artificial intelligence and he's from 1939. So to him, that is science fiction. And so they're trying to use this computer, this AI, to do what they can, but it comes under attack from the Dominus. And the power source becomes compromised. And they're trying to use this AI to be able to jump to the vanish point. And so Booster Gold jerry-rigs the system and makes it to where they're all zapped to the vanishing point. All of our heroes have made it to this one location. And so as they all sit here and try to figure out what to do, this is when Batman comes up with a theory. You know, this is all beyond him, but he's giving a guess on if all these eras aren't destroyed. What if they were just moved, hidden from sight? And Sinestro tells him, you know, this is a interesting theory. If accurate, it may be able to verify it with the Omni Portal. And this is when he opens up the Omni Portal and he sees Dominus with his family having a normal life. And this is when the team figures out that he's carved out this time for himself. So rather than move other times, he extracted what he wanted to fashion a normal everyday life that could be more than anything that he ever wanted. You know, an idolized period of time, self-contained and control, inaccessible to any threat. And Starfire's immediate thought is, he's vulnerable. Let's make our attack. And both Superboy and Steel oppose this because he's with his children. And Sinestro tells Superboy that he needs to stand down because this one time, we're gonna do what we must. But Dr. Light tells them that they need more information. They don't know exactly what they're dealing with yet. And so the plan is that they're gonna send one individual in to kind of try to talk sense to him. And if it doesn't work, the rest of the team is going to be setting up, getting ready to make their advance. And this is when we pick up in the extracted time. And we see Dominus sitting on the front porch with his family when Batman makes his arrival and tells him, tell your children how you control birth and death of every star. And Dominus is shocked, like he's alive. Batman's alive and tells Batman, this is my home. You're not welcome here. And Batman tells him, this isn't real. This isn't a family. I had a family once and it wasn't anything like this. This is a cheap imitation of what it would be. But he tells him, you can keep all of this as long as everything goes back to the way it was. And Dominus, he just says, no, I'm not going to risk a single hair on my children's head. Not a single blade of grass of this place will be harmed. And this is when we see the daughter use some powers that we didn't know she previously had and blast Batman. Only for Green Lantern to use a force construct and shield them. And we see the rest of the team make their arrival. And this is when the battle breaks out and Dominus starts blasting them, taking Ultra Humanite right off the playing field. And they start blasting Dominus with everything they have. What we're seeing here, though, for the most part, is all the villains getting taken out in this fight, but all our heroes are staying alive. And they have Superboy distract Dominus long enough to figure out what they can do. And the plan here is to break the town down. Break all of this construct that he's created. It'll take his focus off of fighting and diminish everything that's here. Because it's all connected. The chronal energy, his powers, the environment. If they attack the system, it brings it all down. So in layman's terms, destroy the town. And we see the town disappear like the Dominus made everything else. And Dominus sitting there holding his children. And you can feel nothing but sorrow and pity for him. And Superboy believes this to be real. He's just like, there's no way that this is fake. It has to be real. And Sinestro stops him. And he tells him, you know, I assure you that these are constructs. The most convincing I have ever seen, but illusions nonetheless. And we see Dominus holding his children as they slowly disappear and the whole town is gone and we're stuck in the middle of space on a blank slate. And Dominus loses it because this was real to him and he grows to the size of a giant and swats away Superboy like it's nothing. And Steel lets him know the energy he's putting out can't take much more, and that the nodes on his breastplate are probably the source of his power. So they all start blasting at the nodes. And we see Dr. Light manipulate the light with Green Lantern power. And so Sinestro hits her with the lantern ring, and she shoots a yellow lantern beam into the face of Dominus. And we see Superboy come flying down with a hammer of steel and smashing it into Dominus's nodes. And then this is when Batman gets another idea, that those nodes are conduits and they need to find out where they lead. So they have Booster Gold force field them inside of Dominus. And to do this, they have everybody attack. And so we see Sinestro, Starfire, Superboy all making their advance on him, while the rest of the team gets inside. And they get inside and they see what appears to be another light construct, and the house with the apparatus, chronal energy is pumping through it. So essentially they're saying that this house is kind of like his soul. And so they kick in the door and they see a picture on the wall radiating with energy. And their first thoughts are, okay, well, if this is the source, let's destroy it. And this is what Kamandi tells them, maybe this isn't the answer, to take everything away. We're supposed to be the greatest heroes of every generation. Heroes save lives. And Steel agrees. Chronal energy flows from the portrait like water moving a mill wheel. It's converted and pumped out for Dominus to use. In their world, in our world, it's called kinetic energy to electricity. Here, it's chronal energy to matter manipulation, quantum mechanics, whatever he needs it to be. But conversion of energy always requires some kind of turbine. And this is when he takes the picture down and they see some kind of turbine moving in the background that's supplying his infinite source of power. And so they blast it. And Dominus immediately feels it as he's losing power. And he disappears, unsure of where he went. But all we see is him with the portrait in the middle of nothing. Pure whiteness. So it seems he's lost in time somewhere, living with that painting. The painting of his lost love. Now, we're taken back to the vanishing point, and we see Wave Rider and Old Man Booster Gold, telling them that everything has been put back into place, and time is once whole again. Dominus's goneness had locked these two into a type of stasis, frozen in place, unable to progress in any way because the time stream can't flow if it isn't whole. And now the question is, where do we go? And Batman says, assuming Wave Rider is right and everything is fixed and flowing like it should, they return home. And Kamandi's a little hesitant on this. He's like, my home's a disaster of a world where finding food and staying alive is a daily struggle. You want me to return to that? And Wave Rider tells him, yes, you will return to the moments and places of your departure, for you are the most unique of universes. Where time passes differently, where people age differently, almost imperceivable. They all have important roles to play. Kamandi's role is to help rebuild Earth from the disaster he knows it as into something better for Superboy to see in the 31st century. And so Dr. Light asks, how do we leave? How do we get out of here? I miss my family, I miss my kids, I gotta go. And Kamandi was the one who gathered them all, but Wave Rider will be the one to take them all home. And so we see Superboy dropped off in the 31st century. We see Steel drop off in 1993, taking on Cyborg Superman. We see Dr. Light dropped off in 1987. Booster Gold in 85, Starfire in 83 with the Teen Titans. Sinestro dropped on Ron, and Kamandi dropped off on Earth after the Great Disaster. And he asks Old Man Booster Gold if he'll hang around a while, because Kamandi hasn't really had much human interaction, so it's nice to have that kind of companionship, even if it's for a little while. And this is when we pick up in the time stream. And this is probably the most important part of this issue. And this is where Batman and Wave Rider have a discussion. And Batman asks him, what did you mean when you talked about our universe being special? And Wave Rider says, we call this the Linearverse. Here people age far more slowly, living much longer than elsewhere. Your youth and vitality will endure for decades, enabling you to effectively far longer be Batman more than any other normal universe. And so in the meantime, he gives him something. He gives him a time traveler wristband to be used only as a last resort in a true crisis. And he tells him to embrace it, for it will endure in ways he can't even imagine yet that spans decades, changing with the times as you align with the world's greatest heroes, as you fashion Earth into the most unique of the Linearverse's worlds. And this is the beginning of the new era. And so what it's telling us here is that the Linearverse affects individuals in our main DC continuity. So Superman, Batman, the Flash, all of these individuals are affected in the Linearverse, and they age much differently. So 1939 Batman is the same Batman throughout the entire timeline up until today in 2021. Now, how that works for continuity, I'm sure there's going to be some issues here and there, but for the most part, they're just saying, you know, our characters have been the same characters, they've just changed with the times. And they age much differently and much slower than regular human beings. So that's why we haven't got new iterations of characters. That's why they haven't died after 80 years of being in publication. And they're all aware of this. So Batman's aware that he's been friends with Superman all of this time. And it kind of goes along and helps with the idea that, you know, the whole DC universe is connected as a whole. They stop doing retcons and are deciding, you know what, we're just going to say it all exists. And the Batman that we first wrote back in 1939, it's the same Batman that we're writing today. It's the same Bruce Wayne. But yeah, that will be the end of this issue. This has been a big one. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Personally, I'm really excited to see what the future holds. Infinite Frontier is what comes next, so we gotta wait and see what that introduces to us. But we're definitely going to be seeing 1939 Batman make an appearance in some kind of crisis in the future. We can only assume. But yeah, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you have not yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit that notification bell, because we have 4 more issues of Future State to come after this. So be sure to stay tuned, and until the next video.